Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm really excited that I got to follow on Sonia. It's always great for me to see what other communities are doing. So you will note that we're a little bit different. As Ron said, we're inland, so we've got different challenges, no less critical and no less problematic. Just checking real quick to make sure you can see my slide.
Yep, all good.
Okay, so not horrific flooding, but pretty classic climate impacts. Upper left hand is drought. That's the Trinity River. We went from that period to the center picture, which was uncontrolled flooding in the matter of a month. We got our annual rainfall during the month of May 17. And that really kind of got our attention during the emergency response on that. Theoretically, the flooding that we saw should not have happened, but it did. Increasingly, we're looking at air pollution dates. We have some horrific and very violent thunderstorms, lower right hand, and then of course Winter Storm Uri, which also got our attention. Let's see if I can figure out how to advance. There we go. So with our friends in Miami, Texas and Louisiana and Miami lead the country in billion-dollar disasters. And Texas is in the top 10 for all 10 types. And we lead the country overall in billions of dollars spent in cleaning up after weather-related disasters. If you want to look at it a different way, I like it in the bar graph because it shows a pretty clear exponential increase over the last 40 years, in particular with the last couple of years being just crazy. So like a lot of cities, we have done a greenhouse gas emissions inventory. No surprises, our big three are buildings and energy combined, and transportation, which actually in our latest update to our greenhouse gas emissions inventory, transportation now forms 38% of our local emissions. That's the bad news. The good news is those are processes that we have some degree of control over. They're human. It's part of the built environment. So like Miami, we have done our own comprehensive environmental and climate action plan, CCAP for short, because that's a mouthful. Unlike Miami, we put everything into one happy plan. And so our plan includes measures to mitigate, in other words, reduce those emissions that are causing the climate weirdness we're experiencing. Includes measures for adaptation. Like Miami, we're looking at a lot of flood protection, a lot of upgrade on our infrastructure to address an uncertain future. Mitigation and adaptation are both critically expensive. And so we started looking at, well, what can we do where we can get more bang for the buck? And so that's where we included consideration of nature-based solutions through environmental quality. In all of these, like Miami and several other cities, we find that those communities that are most impacted by an uncertain climate future are those that are the least well adapted to address it. And so we've got an equity piece on every single action in our plan. So our city council, after the flooding we had in 2017, unanimously adopted the CCAP. It is 97 actions, and I say everything from A to Z, everything from air quality to zero waste, including buildings and energy. We looked at actions for primary benefit. And then probably the most critical thing is we started with a slate of about 400 actions that we found by looking at what we were already doing and benchmarking our city's programs against other cities like Miami. We had 400 actions, which is not that's a scary data management challenge. but it's really not a doable plan. 97 is borderline not doable, but we screened with co-benefits. Are we able to effectively reduce vulnerability? Can we save money? Are we creating jobs? Are we creating opportunities for training? How effective are these? And so the 97 actions we've got are all typically getting more bang for the buck, more than one of these co-benefits. The other thing that we did that makes our plan a little bit different is that we evaluated each one of these actions for the ability to both make sure that some of our vulnerable populations have access to the things that we're doing, like solar or electric vehicles, that sort of thing. Or the other thing that we looked at is the ability that if we implement this, are there impacts to some of our sensitive communities? And so it's probably one of the very few plans that right out of the gate is looking at that equity piece. The other thing that I'm really excited about is, like Miami, we have a database plan. And this is from our 2019 update to the 2015 greenhouse gas inventory. We're thrilled. The dashed line is where we want to be. The colored lines are where the modeling shows we would be. And right now we're on target. That said, we've done some of the easy stuff, and we're starting to move more towards some of the harder actions in the plan, harder and more expensive. So just a couple of ideas of things that we're doing. We have a goal in our plan to do net zero construction by 2030. What we have found is there are state laws that require us to be fuel neutral relative to construction. And so increasingly, we're looking at net zero carbon specs. And so that's one of our projects. The other thing, like Miami, and it's really interesting because we began our plan in the summer of 2019, which is when we had a pretty bad tornado, a couple of really scary wind events, and flooding. And I said, we need resilience hubs. And they're like, yeah, nice. We'll do that later. After the winter storm, we got the idea of the resilience hubs and why they're so critical, because a lot of our shelters lost power, lost water, lost function, basically. And so we have begun implementing a combination of solar and battery for some of our shelters, so that we can keep the lights on and take care of our residents when we get inclement weather. We also found that we have some local impediments to weatherization. Again, this is a gift of the winter event, is that we lost residents because they froze in their homes. They didn't have power. We recognize that we have folks that could really benefit from weatherization, both with respect to being more energy efficient, but also being able to stay warm and cool depending on what's going on outside. The other thing that's critical is we're updating our building codes to the 2021 International to support solar photovoltaics and also EV charging. The national program by the Renewable Energy Lab has a great app to make permitting for solar a lot easier. And so our permit office is currently looking at that as well. Our second one, and this is probably right along that line, is the renewable energy piece. We're doing a study right now on expanding community solar. We're also looking at ways for bundling solar to make it easier for people to implement solar energy. Transportation was part of a larger effort around air quality, actually. We're in severe non-attainment for ozone and are facing monetary fines. And so we are working with our local council of governments. The DFW area actually has about 200 different city entities. And so Dallas really can't implement actions like this on our own. effectively. And so we're working together with some of our other local cities and with our local council of governments to expand transit-oriented design, expand micromobility on our trail system, and expand both implementation and adoption of electric vehicles. Water resources like Miami, flooding is one of our biggest risks, although it's not coastal. As you saw from our flood pictures, we have challenges. The photo on the right is Big Tex, not the state fair kind. It is a tunnel boring machine that did a 5-mile long tunnel from one part of the city that consistently floods right now beyond our central business district, so that we can relieve about a third of the city's area from flooding. One of the other things, and gets into those environmental quality areas, last year we added 195 acres of green space to public realm. We're moving forward with additional actions relative to both implementing our urban forest master plan, but also with respect to addressing emerald ash borer, continuing to promote tree planting efforts. Many people don't know it, but Dallas is actually #2 in the country for heat island impacts. We're #2 behind Phoenix, and Phoenix is a desert. They have an excuse. We don't. One of the things that we're also doing, and it's one of those crossover things, is we're looking at small off-road landscape equipment. Many people don't know it, but a leaf blower puts out as much emissions as a Ford F-150 traveling 300 miles. And so we're looking at requiring or transitioning to an all-electric landscape policy as well. We're in the middle of bringing forward an urban ag plan. This is one of the things that when we went to the community, one of the big desires was to have local healthy food. We have areas where we can grow food, but we don't. Our distance from food to table is about 2,500 miles. And with an uncertain heat and dry period, temperature and water availability are both critical for growing. And so traditional soil farms may not be the way of the future. And so we're looking at how do we best improve local food production, and how do we future-proof that food production. And with that, last but not least, this is one of the most challenging areas that we've got, and that is air quality. We're under severe non-attainment for air quality, where the state and EPA are making noises about monetary fines. So everything that we're doing in our plan should help improve air quality. But it is a critical challenge, and it is a public health challenge. One of the things that we're doing under a couple of grants is installing non-regulatory neighborhood air quality monitors. We're also looking at batch plant regulations. We have found we have some areas, and this is very definitely an equity issue. Some areas of the city have 20 or more batch plants, and they're adjacent to low-income neighborhoods. And so we're tackling that through policy, through the air quality data that we're acquiring, and working to change the rules. And it's kind of embarrassing. The last 3 batch plants that we ran down the permits on, we found were associated with city projects. And so it becomes an effort of educating our own folks to know that, yeah, you need concrete. We're building a city. Concrete is critical to construction. But maybe if there's 20 batch plants already in an area, you contract and use one of those existing plants rather than building a new one. So all of these actions that we've got in our CCAP relate to policy considerations. So the policies that we're working on right now, hot and heavy. We want to update our green building policy. Dallas has had a green building policy requiring LEED since about 2003. It's almost 20 years old. And so we're now looking at net zero carbon construction moving forward. We're looking at related building code updates to support that. We are converting our own fleet to electric vehicles. And then we're also looking at policy concerning siting and implementation of solar PV so that we can increase the amount of solar production as well. With that, kind of like Miami, we've got onboard dashboards so people can kind of follow along, see how we're doing, see where we need help. Our public has been incredibly fantastic at providing both support and the little nudge we need on tackling some of the harder things that we've got. Also, if you're interested, if you're from Texas, there is the state climatologist put out a recent guide to extreme weather in Texas. I will tell you, it's terrifying to read it. The other thing is that the Global Change Organization of the federal government is working on an update to the national climate assessments. That information presented in that document is also terrifying. You can see, if you Google either, you can find them. The National Climate Assessment should be out next spring for comments. And with that, I'm also open to questions.